see you guys in the dark.
I'll begin by giving a little background. At the time this happened, I was 16. I'm a female, by the way, working at a chain coffee place while in high school. I'm in college now. I'm 19 years old, 7 hours away from the said place. This happened at a time in my life in which I was super shy and had a tough time standing up for myself. In retrospect, I could have handled it a lot better. I used to work closing shifts with my best friend after school. It'd be like 3 to 10 p.m. or 5 to 10 p.m. We worked at a relatively dead store, so we spent most of our time playing music and talking to each other. We did our duties like taking the trash out, restocking. Although both of us already dreaded taking the trash out, as we had to go out back. The dumpsters were behind the store in a dimly lit area next to a sketchy liquor store. One night a man came in. It wasn't unusual to have customers come near closing. It was just uncommon to see anyone we didn't already know. Our store was mostly just regulars. He was lanky and probably around 30. I mostly just remember his eyes. They were piercing, the type that never break a stare. I remember initially thinking that he was attractive. The way that he spoke was short and concise, just ordering a small hot latte. I made his order, and that was it. I told my friend about how I thought he was attractive, and we then started referring to him as a small hot latte guy. He came a bunch of times after that, each time staying a little longer and longer, talking a little bit more. One day he came with a woman, presumably his girlfriend. I remember I felt a little weird, like she was staring at me, or like they had spoken about me beforehand. She glanced over at him and said, "Wow, she is pretty." I didn't think much of it. I said thank you, served them, and thought that that would be the end of it. He then began showing up and talking to me a lot without her. He started off as being friendly. Then he got kind of flirty. Initially, I was just flattered, but being underage and immature, I didn't even think about the fact that it was kind of alarming. He began to stay for a while. Sometimes he would bring a laptop or even a notebook. I would feel him staring at me and listening to our conversations. But at that point, I wasn't getting creep vibes from him, as my coworker and I had dealt with our fair share of creeps. He then somehow got my number. To this day, I honestly don't know how he did. He texted me, and somehow I still wasn't creeped out. We would talk about music a lot. Then I began to learn more about him. He was in his late 30s and had prior problems with substance abuse that he never really got into. He went back to school for art and would show me his pieces. He'd also send a lot of pictures of nature. I thought that they were nice. Looking back, they were actually pretty creepy. For example, a picture of his backyard sent at like 3 a.m. He'd stay and work on his art as well. He then told me that he barely enjoyed hot lattes. He just wanted to come see me. He would come in and begin giving me gifts. This was the point I finally started realizing that I did not like the situation. He began by just giving little snacks or drinks. I would accept, but would never eat or drink them. It wasn't that necessarily I thought he had bad intentions. I just had a hard time accepting gifts. I remember one night he brought me a book about one of his favorite artists. I reluctantly took it, but tried to decline before. I remember telling him about one of my favorite musicians, sent him a link to a performance that I really liked. He started kind of being a little sexual, while still talking about the song. He then began talking super aggressively, and when I would laugh it off, decline when he'd asked to send pictures. I began talking less and less, told my friend about the situation. She agreed that it was getting creepy, and said that I should change my schedule. I told her that I would just be fine. He still would come in every week at closing time, and he'd even stay in his car till we closed, meaning he'd watch me go to the back and take the trash out. I began making excuses as to why I wouldn't talk, and began going to the back store when I'd see him. He then sent me a bunch of texts about how graceful I looked while working. I didn't respond to these. He kept texting me, and I told him I didn't want to talk anymore. He sent me a bunch of messages describing how much I meant to him, and how he wouldn't be okay. I started freaking out, blocked his number. Still, I returned to work. I honestly thought that he would stop coming in. I felt uneasy the whole shift. My friend said that if he came to just go to the back and wait it out. I saw his car coming, and my heart sank. I was on the verge of tears and hurried to the back. I could hear them talking, but couldn't decipher what exactly was being said. Then about 10 minutes later, she came to the back. I could visibly see that she was upset. We ended up both just crying and hugging each other. She told me he kept asking to see me and asking how I was. She just kept refusing him. She told him how I was underage and how he made me feel uncomfortable. He wouldn't give up, though. Eventually, she threatened him, and then he left. We were both shaken up, but I thought that it was over. It was time to take out the trash and lock up. We both felt okay at this point. I was opening the door while juggling like 3 bags of trash and saw something on the ground. I was confused at first, but then realized what I saw. It was flowers and a note. I felt sick to my stomach and looked around the parking lot. I didn't see his car. I threw them out and immediately told my friend I didn't want to read the note. She read it and told me I had to. It was something to the effect of, "I've never felt so connected to someone. You're breaking my heart. Please don't do this. I'm sorry." Looking back, I honestly didn't lead him on, but initially I just had felt as if I was in the wrong. Nonetheless, we turned the corner to take the trash out. Both prayed the parking lot was empty. It wasn't. Let's just say the trash was not going to be taken out that night. I continued working there and still worked there on my breaks from college. I had different hours after that. In the summer I was going to leave for my freshman year. I saw him yet again. It was around 3 p.m. It was busy. We had made eye contact. He left. And that was the last time that I saw him. Looking back, I was so naive and could have handled the situation so much better. I am forever thankful to my friend. In high school, I had a stalker. I'll try to keep it concise, but there's a lot of information for sure. I was 16. We met on Facebook. He went to a school nearby, and we decided to meet up for a movie. We had a great time together, and ended up dating each other. First time he came to my parents' house, he had an ankle monitor for his house arrest. And I couldn't tell anyone why. Since he was a minor, we couldn't find out. My parents obviously didn't allow us to hang out, so we hung out at his house or around town at the YMCA camp. I was pretty rebellious and naive. Things started to get weird when I noticed that his family was pretty odd. One day we were having sex in his bedroom, and I saw his father looking through the blinds. I screamed and called him out. His dad ran off. Stalker guy told me that his dad was just into redheads and liked to watch us. I went to leave, and his mom was doing crack in the kitchen. So I decided that it was time to break up. This is when it got bad. He started crying and told me that he's in cancer treatment, and that's why he needs me. He doesn't have long to live, blah blah blah. I believed him and told him that we could just be friends. This is when the stalking started. He switched schools to my high school, but never went to class. He would just stand outside of my classroom, looking inside until it was passing period. When I could leave class, he wouldn't address me. He would just follow about 10 to 15 feet behind me to my next period, stand outside of the classroom again. I was too intimidated to say something to him, so I just let it happen for weeks. It started to progress to where he would follow me home every day. He would get on the same bus as me and walk 10 to 15 feet behind me all the way to my house. He would stand outside, just staring up at the window until around the time my parents got home. Then he would just leave. Finally, I told him to fuck off and leave me alone. I told him that we could no longer be friends or acquaintances and to just forget about me. However, that escalated things way further. I started getting about 150 calls a night. Half of them were him screaming death threats and in detail torture methods that he wanted to do to me. The other half were him singing love songs that he wrote on his guitar. Every time I blocked his number, he seemed to just magically get a new one, leave more messages on that. I woke up one day to see that overnight he had left me one of those dancing, singing snowmen on my porch. He had stabbed it in the head, and the knife was still sticking out. He covered it in his liquid deodorant that I had previously mentioned liking the smell of. I noticed there was a hole where the little song recording device was. When I pressed the hand, it was still the regular Frosty the Snowman song that played. It was his voice singing eerily. I'm going to have you forever. Never going to let you be. I was done at this point. Told my parents about it, who contacted the school. They suspended him, but he still waited at my bus stop every day and walked to my house with me. One day he ran at me, like he was going to tackle me. When I tensed up for the impact, he stopped and hugged me. It wasn't a regular hug. It was like he was trying to crush me. I was 5'1", maybe about 90 pounds at the time. He ended up cracking one of my ribs. I cried. He started crying too before running off. He left me a voicemail apologizing in a song. This one night is the night that I will never forget, and it's the reason that we got a restraining order. My dad got a gun as well. I woke up one evening for no reason, just was fully awake. I got up to my kitchen to get a glass of water to relax, and in the reflection of the fridge, I saw movement in my backyard. I couldn't see well because it was so dark outside. I went to the back sliding glass door to get a better look. When I got closer, I was met with the silhouette of a 6'4" man standing just outside of the door. Stalker guy was in my backyard, under my room at 3 a.m. He was just staring at me. I yelled. My parents had gotten up, but he was gone by the time my dad went outside. There's a patio right outside my bedroom window that goes all the way to the ground, so it's possible he could have been on top of the patio, looking directly into my bedroom window before. We got a restraining order granted, shortly after that at least, and Stalker guy dropped out of school. I haven't seen him since in person, but every 6 months or so, he makes a new Facebook, then tries to friend request me. I just block it and report it every single time. Pretty scary stuff. So when I was 15, my mom was friends with a man who wanted to date her. His name was Jake. My mom was not interested in a relationship with this man at all, and in fact was dating another guy named Colt. My family is full of pretty serious rednecks, and my mom is no exception. So one day, Mom invited Colt and his roommate Frank over to shoot some guns at our home range. We shot for a while, and eventually went in around dark. So my mom and Colt got drunk after we went in. Frank cannot drive due to some brain damage, so they ended up staying the night at the house. Around 2 a.m., I was still up playing video games. My mom and Colt were in her room asleep when Frankie comes running down the hallway saying a truck just pulled into the driveway. I look out the window and see it's Jake. Apparently my mom hadn't texted him in a few hours, and he's extremely possessive, so he went to go check and see if she was home. Keep in mind, Colt's Ranger was parked in the driveway, and is very obviously a guy's truck. Jake absolutely flips. He starts ringing the doorbell non-stop, beating on the door, walking around the house, beating on windows, screaming my mom's name, circling Colt's truck. At this point, my mom and Colt were awake. Since we have blackout curtains, she tells us to keep the lights off and hide in the hallway, and if we don't do anything or respond, he'll think that no one's home and just leave. Colt, being completely sober now, is understandably pissed off, threatening to go out and deal with it. It is now important to point out the size difference between Colt and Jake. Colt is 5'5" and about 125 pounds. Jake is 6'3" and 240. Jake could punt Colt 50 feet if he wanted to. Because of this, my mom forces Colt to stay inside. This went on for about 45 minutes. At one point, we see on the camera monitor in my mom's room that Jake had punched the side of Colt's truck. Then we hear the screen of one of the windows slide up. The window in question is locked, and Jake couldn't fit through anyways, thank God. It's at this point that I think of the only thing that would make Jake leave. I grab a gun and act terrified. Walk to the living room and ask who the hell it is out the window. Jake realizes that it's me and asks where my mom is. I tell him that she's out with her friends and that I haven't heard from her. I'll call him when she gets home if I'm awake. He says thank you and then leaves. After all the shit he did, that's all it took for him to leave. Honestly, I was amazed. I genuinely thought that I was going to have to shoot him. Later on that night, around 4, we hear his truck outside again. He squeals his tires down the road, obviously pissed that my mom still hadn't called him. The next morning, he's back again at 10, again beating on the doors and windows, screaming and trying to get a reaction. Colt again tries to go out and handle it, but Mom won't let him. He finally leaves again. Colt goes out to look at his truck. There's a 3-inch deep dent in the side of his bed. Colt is understandably pissed off. Tells my mom to let him know if that fucking creep comes back. Jake had beat on our doors until his hand bled, and had blood on the doors and windows. My mom wouldn't let me call the police because she felt that it would just cause unnecessary strain, and that she thought that it was over, so the cops were unfortunately never involved. She was also worried he'd do worse if the police were called. My mom stopped talking to Jake after that, and I never felt comfortable in that house at night again. Once I started driving, I didn't stay the night there very much, opting to visit during the day and go back to my dad's at night. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos and become a stalker of the night, and I'll see you next time.